Welcome to the Craftsman Founder Podcast, hosted by Lucas Carlson. Every week, we talk to founders, entrepreneurs, and those who've made a craft out of creating companies and enterprises. Listen every week to get ideas for starting, promoting, and growing your business. There are no shortcuts, just good old-fashioned hard work and craft. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's interview.
Hello, this is Lucas Carlson from the Craftsman Founder Podcast. This week, I've got a really awesome guest, Heaton Shah. Now, Heaton is an awesome guy. He's created some awesome companies, a really great thinker. He's a deep thinker. If you check out his blog, you can see some really deep thoughts. This guy has a lot, not only of great thoughts, he's also got a lot of influence. He's really well known in the Bay Area. Kissmetrics. He's worked with Neil Patel to start Kissmetrics and Crazy Egg, and so Neil Patel was one of our other guests, and I wanted to bring Heaton on to kind of give us the other side of the picture. And both of them are such great folks. I've worked with them. I've talked with them before, and I wanted to expose them to you guys and help think through some deep questions in life a little bit. And so, Heaton, can you tell us about yourself and a little bit about your background?
Sure. I started all three of my companies, my internet companies, with Neil. And the first one was actually a consulting business back in 2003. And then what we were trying to do is we would take all the money that we made, basically providing marketing services for other people, and try to dump it into building products. And we got sort of lucky. That's actually how we met Lucas in a way. One of his really good friends actually works with us at Crazy Egg. That was the business that ended up working, and it's still alive. It was launched in 2005, and it helps you sort of visually see where people are clicking on a page with like a heat map and a bunch of other tools. Pretty sort of popular service at this point. And we've been growing that business, and while we were doing that, we decided to build Kissmetrics and raise money for it. So Crazy Egg is self-funded, and Kissmetrics is funded. I guess Neil and I get to see both sides of the world of raising money and not raising money, and sort of we really wanted to see how all of that worked and have a pretty good understanding of it.
And Neil's up in Seattle, and you're in the Bay Area. Is that right?
Actually, Neil lives in Las Vegas now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so you guys have been partners for a long time, and you guys really make an awesome team. Do you have any advice for people that are looking for co-founders, looking for partners, trying to find somebody?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We found each other a little bit accidentally through Neil's sister. I'm actually married to her, so I'm married to his sister. He's my brother-in-law, as well as my co-founder, and known him since he was 11 years old and I was 15. So I think that's taking from my experience and sharing it, I think it's very rare. But if I get asked this question a lot in general, and I think just like any other relationship, you're trying to find somebody you can get along with, and that, for lack of a better word, in one way or another, or many ways, complements you. So my suggestion these days is like, if you kind of know it when you meet the person within a very short period of time, most of the time. And otherwise, there's all kinds of tricks you can do if you're not very good at, sort of feeling people out or whatever right away. Just start working with them on something. My biggest suggestion is start working with them on something, and you'll learn everything you need to know about your relationship and how you guys get along and all that kind of stuff. So, we don't have any excuses to work with other people at this point, regardless of where they are in their career, or even on small projects. Things are so easy to build today, these days, that unless you're obviously like Lucas and like to work on really hard problems. But I would say that just start working with people and start, sort of seeing what the relationship, where it goes, and if you guys actually can get along.
And you guys, you're not in Las Vegas, are you?
Mm-mm.
You're not.
And no, not the same location. We haven't been in the same location for at least, I would say, about 4 or 5 years. No, sorry, longer than that. About 7, 8 years.
And how is that? How do you do a great partnership where you're not in the same location?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in writing, whether it's email or anywhere from Trello to Hackpad to Google Docs and spreadsheets, to even admin systems internally. And honestly, we probably talk, I would say easily multiple times a week, sometimes as much as every single day, depending on what the need is. And I mean talk on the phone or Skype or whatever. Neil's actually out of the country right now, so it's more chat and stuff like that. But it's a communication thing. I'd say that it doesn't matter where people are. It's just about figuring out ways that you can communicate. And as time has gone on, even since I started my first internet business in 2003, the ability for us to communicate over the internet, there's a lot more options than just Skype now, and a lot more things you can do to collaborate. So I think in person is always, the ideal and great and all that kind of stuff. But the way we work, like we work just fine without having to be in the same place at the same time.
Cool. So who does what? How do you split up your responsibilities?
Yeah. So Neil is mostly focused on sales and marketing. I'm mostly focused on product and engineering. And then I would say what I would probably call growth would be something that both of us really care about a lot. Whether it's personal growth, business growth, you want to call it growth hacking, whatever you want to call it. Those are things that both of us really deeply care about. And so there ends up being multiple projects we're both working on. But at any given time, if you were to pick different things, like let's say, for one of our businesses, Crazy Egg, we have a blog. Neil's responsible for the blog and hiring people there, managing them, making sure that the content's great. But he's also really good at that, and he loves it. In terms of the product and getting product development done and improving the features, adding new features, managing the team there, and helping them and facilitating designers and all that kind of stuff. That's my job.
Awesome. So one of the posts on your blog that I really liked was you brought up a question that I'd like to ask you. So what's your earliest, most traumatic memory?
That's a great question. So in the context is on my blog, I asked that question and I said that this is a great question for early stage startup like hires or candidates. In reality, the way I've experienced it, it's a great question for anybody. But it was a little bit controversial. Not controversial, but what ended up being controversial. But I really like to get to the heart of somebody as fast as possible. And obviously, if you just ask that as the first question you ask in an interview, and they're not comfortable, it can be a little bit inappropriate or off-putting. But I have a pretty good way of trying to make people comfortable and
how do you do that?
I generally just tend to try to understand the person really fast, and what I mean is you can just tell a lot by you can read books if you need to. I haven't really read any books on this, but you can read books that tell you how to read people's cues and stuff. So that's one way. Another way is just talk to them and try to understand how they think about things, and whether that question even is something worth asking them. Generally, though, I love asking the question. So what's my earliest traumatic memory? So at one point in our businesses, I don't remember what year, it might have been 2004, 2005, we actually lost about $1 million on a never launched hosting company. And when I asked myself that question, once I figured out that's a good question, I thought it was that, because it was very traumatic. We lost a lot of our own money, and the product never launched, and we made a lot of mistakes and all that kind of stuff. And then I look back and I think, actually, the time that I was had the most traumatic moment was actually the one I wrote about in the blog post, which was actually when I was 8 years old and my mother passed away. And it was something where I'd been prepared, just because my parents had told me she was going to pass away, or she had a terminal disease since I was 2 years old. And I didn't cry that day, and so it didn't really register as traumatic in terms of, from an outward physical standpoint. But from a mental standpoint, that was definitely probably, I can't think of anything worse than that at this point.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I think that a lot of people would be like you. Like, the first thing that they think of about a traumatic memory might be about money, it might be about business, but then there's something usually a lot more traumatic deeper in their past. Why do you do startups? Why do you think you do startups?
Well, the simplest reason is since I was 5 years old, my dad told me I shouldn't work for anyone. So I tell you that's the simplest explanation. Most people don't listen to their parents. I actually do listen to my dad, especially when he says things like that. There's only a couple things he said to me. He said, get married early and don't work for anyone. And so I make it my goal not to work for anyone, and it seems like the best option. We tried. Sorry.
What about getting married early? Did you do that?
Yeah, I did do that. My wife and I have been dating since we were 15, actually, when I met Neil as well. And so, yes, I definitely did that. Those are the only two things I listened to him on, though. If you ask him, he'll probably tell you those are the ones he cared about, but I didn't really listen to him on anything else. And I never do anymore. That's weird. So it's like a lot of other things that I say about myself. I just don't know any better. So the reason I do startups and try to start things and help other people do that and all that is just I think it's really awesome that we can do that. Number one. Number two, I really believe everyone has the potential to start things, no matter how small or big or whatever. It doesn't have to be like a venture funded startup, but generally everyone has that capability. Whether they want to do it or not is a different story.
And do you know what your motivation is? Sure, you do it because you don't know what else to do, but is there something deep that you want out of it?
Yeah, I really like seeing things grow, whatever they are, whether it's my businesses, people, my kids, plants, whatever. And I think I just have a fascination with how things grow, how they can be sort of manipulated, not in a bad way, but like I'm referring to plants more than anything else. So I started reading up on plants a little bit. I have a garden in the backyard, although my father-in-law is way better of a green thumb than I am. But I just don't have the patience and time. But at the same time, I would basically, I learned that if you actually shake a plant vigorously, it causes the hormones in the plant to go all over the shoots, all of them, not just the top, and it bushes out the plant. So I have a ghost pepper plant that I've done that with in my backyard right now. So every year I do it only with 1 or 2 plants because my father-in-law doesn't really like that tactic. But and it works. They bush out, they don't grow as tall, and you get a lot of, I've got like 20, 30 little ghost peppers sitting there on my plant. I don't think I would have got that many if I didn't really like shake the plant and make it bush out. And figure out how to influence them and help them grow. That's probably the reason I do this.
And how often do you have to shake the plant?
It's like wind. So if you notice plants in windy areas, they're actually way more bushier than plants that are not in windy areas. So it's just a matter of doing it a few times when it's young, and generally you got the gist of it. But for me, it's like I try to look: is it going wide or is it going tall, or is it doing both? And I just assess it. And that's also the part of growth, which is like you get to watch something, and if I were really super geeky about it, I'd go measure it and try to understand the width and the number of shoots. But like I don't need to do that. I got enough of that in my businesses. So, but like, yeah, that's what gets me up in the morning. It's like watching things grow. What can we grow today? How can we make it grow faster? How can we, understand what it's going to take? How can we learn more about growth and things like that?
Cool. So one of the things that I've noticed that you've done recently, you started an email newsletter, and it's called the SaaS Weekly, and I'm subscribing to it. I think anybody listening could get value from it. Why did you start it?
Yeah, I had this domain, Heaton.com, which I bought, I think, last year or the year before, and it was just sitting there. And I ran into this platform called curated.by, and it really was it made it easy to do what I already love to do. What I love to do is on Twitter, I love to share links. I love to find them, and I love to share them. I do it all myself. I schedule it with Buffer, and I would love to have it be more intimate and more specific. And every business I've started after the consulting company, and every business that gets me excited is mostly a software as a service business, just because I love recurring revenue and I love software at this point. So I started the newsletter because I think SaaS people, I'm always good at finding links. People ask me a lot of questions about SaaS businesses, so I thought I'd just start a newsletter. All it is a curation of the links that I found useful, interesting, informative for the week, broken down into different categories like marketing, sales, growth, business, and product. And I just share the links. And I also have a tip of the week in there, something I've learned through my SaaS businesses. And in general, the thesis is I wish there was this much content out there when I started in 2005, 2004 building SaaS businesses. Now there's more content than ever, and I think the problem's a little bit different, which is like how do you find the best content that you need right now for whatever you're working on. Because obviously, if you're going to need it a year from now, it doesn't matter. If you're going to need it, if you needed it a year ago, you're screwed. It's just timely content for people interested in SaaS businesses, working in them, founders, even investors, are on the list. So yeah, that's what I do. That's what it's about. And I'm on issue. I think this week is going to be 7. Yeah, last week was 6.
That's great. And so, what is the service again that you're using to do this?
Yeah, it's called Curated by. Curated.by.
And go ahead.
It's by this gentleman who started iOS Dev Weekly, and he's been running that newsletter for I think over a year. And 6 months in or so, he had this feeling that he could build a tool. I'd say that product easily saves me 1 to 2 hours a week. It works kind of like Delicious, where I have a bookmarklet. I bookmark the things every day, and then they go into the sort of queue, and then I get to put them into whatever newsletter I want.
Got it. That sounds awesome.
It's really awesome.
So you're a product guy, and you've launched a number of products at this point. Do you have any advice for any founders about how to do a great product launch?
Yeah, I should be asking you that question. You accidentally, I assume, or I think, based on the stuff I knew about it, did a really great product launch, and it really mirrors my philosophies around it. So I think you can build a list of people who are very interested in what you're doing early, and so email collection, putting up a survey, and really trying to validate the problem is really important. But for the purpose of actually releasing and launching, the bigger your email list of people who want, I call it early access. I don't really like beta. But people that want early access, the more people you're going to have in the beginning to sort of show something to, figure out what they think, or even have them use the product. And so even with Crazy Egg, this was back in 2005, we had 23,000 people on an email list from the home page where they just put in their email because they were curious. And we even spent some money on ads back then just because it was harder to get that many emails compared to 11 years later or 10 years later or whatever. So yeah, I love the idea of, I think, getting emails, but more importantly, even sending them weekly updates so that they know what is going on with it, and they're sort of along for the ride. I think that's really important. So these days, I think my ideas have evolved, and they've been about how can I have people come along the journey with me?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And one thing that people might not have known, so what you might be referring to is I recently, for my day job, I launched a thing called Panamax, which is a docket tool. A lot of people don't realize this, but when I had the idea for Panamax, which was about 9-10 months ago, we started working on the project. But what a lot of people don't realize is I actually started blogging about Docker-related topics, and I started an email list at the same time as I had the idea for Panamax. And the entire time that we were developing it and engineering it, before anybody could see it, as you said, I was building an email list. A lot of people come to me and they say, Lucas, I want to do a great launch. I've been working on my product. I want to do a great launch next week. They've already missed the kind of right time to get started on a launch. I think that's a really good point. Do you see? Can you tell us the top 3 common mistakes you see founders make?
Sure. I think the number one mistake is they build things people don't want, and that's that has to do with not assessing the market need and trying to figure out whether people even care about it. So that's probably top of my list. I think the second one is
how common do you think that is?
I think it's probably the number one most common thing. And the reason is a lot of people start businesses because they have an idea, they have a problem or a pain they want to solve, and they don't really spend the time to figure out if other people give a shit. And what I like to say about that is at some point, your customer is not going to be you, not going to be your friend, and it's going to be somebody you don't know at all, and you need to bring them on, and they need to really care about this problem and want you to solve it for them. And I think that's the number one thing. People fail miserably, horribly at trying to meet the market need because they're usually delusional. And
do you have any ways to tell if you're in delusion or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with these days they call it customer development. So it's talking to customers early and trying to figure out what problem they have in an unbiased way. So in that case, you don't really talk to them at all. Not even really. You just don't talk to them at all about your product, your business, anything like that. And instead, you talk to them about themselves and their workflow, or what they go through every day. And you look for pain. You look for that feeling like, oh, it's horrible. I got to do this every week, and then I have to do that, and then like I got to put all this information in here, and then I got to log into this system, and that when you start hearing stuff like that, you're like, yeah, that's good. Like I can help you with that, but you don't say that. You keep listening, and you try to make sure that enough people have that problem too. So the way I like to say it is like I think people start with ideas, and the way I like to think of it is like ideas are just basically a assumption that you have about a solution or even about a problem. So ideas are just a solution, but you don't really, appreciate the problem without actually looking at it and saying, do other people actually have this problem too?
Awesome. Okay, so number two. What's number two most common mistake?
Yeah, number two, and this is like, it obviously depends on the stage, so I'm going to talk about a later stage on the third one, but on the second one, I would just say that it's like people think they need money. So, it's like, oh, I got this product idea, and I'm like, okay, so do you have users? They're like, no. I'm like, when are you going to launch it? They're like, 3 months. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, if I want to be mean about it, I'd say, well, why don't you talk to me in 3 months, and then maybe I can give you some advice, because you'll have something out there and people there, or, if I want to be even more aggressive and I know them well, I'll be like, why can't you launch it next week? Like, what's it going to take? Like, what do you need to remove? What's the core of it? What do you know today? And more importantly, a lot of times I'm like, are you sure this is a problem worth solving? If I see something and I'm like, it just doesn't seem right, or it seems like they could do better. And so I think the biggest problem is like they're sitting there trying to think they need money, not getting far fast enough, and think that money will solve their problems, and that's absolutely not the case.
Totally agree. Number three.
Yeah, number three, I think they, and I've made this mistake, and I've seen a lot of other people do it. Is they just don't understand what scaling your team looks like. They don't really think about that enough. Once you have a product, you have some sense of product market fit, enough people that love it. It's like, how do you actually scale the business? What part of your business do you need to scale? How? What questions do you need to ask yourself to figure out where your gaps are and what you need, who you need to hire? And a lot of people consider that like a little bit more boring, sort of business school MBA type of stuff. And I think it's actually some of the most important things is like, okay, now you have something. How do you make sure that you grow it as fast as you can and you get the market share you want?
So how do you do it?
I think it's just asking yourself where the biggest bottlenecks are in the business. That comes from data. It comes from the opportunity. It comes from information about customers and like where you need to evolve the product. And then it's just a game of like, okay, how do I hire those people? Most of the time, it's a hiring problem of, okay, how do I hire the people I need once I figure out what areas I really need them?
Yeah, hiring is very, very hard, and you've actually done a really good job. My friend John that works with you is just a brilliant programmer. So do you have any advice about how to hire great people?
Yeah, I mean, the way I actually ran into John is I emailed everyone in 2005 when we had a problem with Crazy Egg where the folks that were working on it couldn't figure out how to do some really easy things that I could Google, and I'm not an engineer, but I could Google them and figure out what to do with them, or at least get some direction, and they just weren't able to do it. And then I just got a little, antsy, and I decided to look for someone. And so I emailed everybody on the rubyonrails.org list, people who were, there was a directory back then, I think it's still there, and there's a lot of people on it. You might have even been on it, I might have even hit you up. I made a lot of friends during that time, and these were all people that were excited about Rails, engineers, and they were on the list. So I just emailed, called, whatever, everybody, and ended up finding John, and he seemed the one that was most confident he could solve the problem. And for many years he was a contractor, and he came on and did the work, and then we sort of convinced him to come on full time and actually help us with Kissmetrics, and currently he's back on Crazy Egg, and yeah, couldn't be more excited to be working with him, and I feel really lucky to have found him at that time. But that's just one trick. I mean, to me, and I wasn't an engineer. I didn't know shit about Ruby or Rails, except I like to learn, so I knew enough, and I knew what problem we had with our software, and so I just wanted someone to come in and solve it. And so these days, like on almost any hiring, I think what really matters, is can you work with them? Can your team work with them? And so figuring out how to give them a project and coming in with something tangible once you actually pull them in and you think you want to work with them can be important. I know companies that do 90-day trial periods. I know companies that work on a project with you for a weekend, or you come in and work with the team for a day or two. So there's a lot of different tactics, but it's really you're trying to find somebody you can get along with. And honestly, there's, no matter what people say, it's like hiring's always been hard. It's just like when times are bad and people can't get jobs, yes, it's a little bit easier, but it's still hard because they still need to fit into your company and be a productive team member. And I think that's the trickiest part. So yeah, in general, I think finding people now, pick a technology you use and go look for people that understand that technology and have raise their hand and say, I'm into this technology. And that's a really easy hack, for lack of a better way to think about it.
Yeah, so what's the best piece of advice you've ever heard about starting a company?
Yeah, I don't know who told me this. I really believe it, and I tend to say it to people, but it's basically when someone talks to me and they're like, I'm thinking about starting a company, I'm like, well, you're probably not going to do it because you haven't done it yet. So the best piece of advice I'd have is just do it. Just start. Anything. And that's probably the addendum to the advice, which is like, I don't care. Start a blog, write a blog post, start an email letter, start tweeting about it. Whatever you got to do to get that little baby step to get you motivated and get you excited to do it, I think just starting is really, really important.
Yep. So you brought up hacks with hiring. One thing you're known for is growth hacking. Can you talk about growth hacking? What is it? Do you have any good growth hacks as examples?
Sure. So growth hacking has become really popular. I'd say the short way to say it is it's a evolution of marketing. Originally, it was something that actually I was at a lunch with Sean Ellis and my friend Patrick Blaskowitz, and we were just talking, and I think Sean at that time was consulting for a lot of early stage fast-growing startups like Dropbox and Zobni and Eventbrite. And he wanted to sort of say, his whole idea was that you don't need a VP of marketing for your company, you need a growth hacker. And this was like, I don't even remember when this was, but this was like 2008, 2007. Don't quote me on that, it's something like that. And he wrote a blog post on it. It didn't really get that popular, but there were a bunch of people that really bought into it. And we started using that term. And then a bunch of years later, this guy named Andrew Chen, who's in the Bay Area, an entrepreneur here, I think he'd been talking to a lot of Bay Area companies, and they had growth teams. And so, and that is actually different than having a growth hacker. Growth teams are teams that are focused on growth. I think Facebook's the most sort of notable case where they had a growth team, probably one of the first, if I'm not mistaken. And so to me, there's a big difference between a growth team and growth hacking. So I'll say that first, or growth hackers. The growth hackers are more very early stage when you don't need a VP of marketing. You need somebody that's on the ground working with the product team and trying to sort of make things better. And that's what you need early on. While a growth team is, as you scale, you need a team of people working on growth. A lot of times, actually, the growth team has marketing people in that team that are doing the internet marketing type of stuff. There's an analyst, there's a product person, product manager on growth, and things like that. So it's sort of an evolution of a single person being a growth hacker. That's the way I would describe it. Now, out of that came this thing called growth hacking. I think growth hacking is it's a combination of improving your product, optimizing conversions, and marketing. And so it's a product marketing function, which includes engineering. And so, growth hacks, there's a ton of stuff out there. Sean Ellis has a site called growthhackers.com, and it's kind of like a Hacker News for this type of thing. I think it's just a great way to think about marketing more from a technology perspective and how technology and your product can help you grow or help you do marketing, and less so like this really new cool thing. It's something a lot of us have been doing but didn't have a name for it. So that's the way I would describe it. Some people call it, it's like, I watch this happen with Lean Startup. I'm seeing it happen with growth hackers where it's like it gets really popular, it kind of becomes a norm, we sort of lose a lot of the terminology, and it just becomes what people do, and I think that'll happen with growth hacks and growth hackers at some point, and we're probably close to getting to that point within the next year or two. just like Lean Startup. I don't hear as many people talk about Lean Startup, but when I talk to them about what they're doing everything that we used to call MVPs or pivots or customer development or whatever you want to call it. And so, instead of even telling you a growth hack, I would just say that like you're just really, what I call it is basically it's engineered marketing, and you could say it's engineered marketing optimization with an end goal of growing the business, looking at week on week growth rates and things like that. So yeah, that's what I got. No hacks for me today.
Okay, sounds great. Have you read any books lately that have inspired you? Like, what about a plant book or a business book? Anything that you've been inspired by?
Yeah. So I need to write a blog post on this book or multiple books, but there's a book called 5 Elements of Effective Thinking, and it's been one of my favorite books. I've read it multiple times, and it's by this gentleman named Edward Berger, and he basically talks about literally becoming more successful through better thinking. And I have this fascination with thinking faster, understanding things faster, and this book is probably the definitive like one thing I can recommend if you're just trying to think better, think faster. I used to always have this feeling like, and I still have it sometimes, but what I know today, I wish I knew a year ago.
Yeah.
And this book has helped me sort of not have to wait a year. Feel stupid.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about the plant book? Are there any plant books?
No plant books. I don't read any plant books anymore. I usually just Google around for things. Also, I just love Google. I'll Google anything. I used to say I can out-Google you even if you're an engineer. I keep up. So no plant books, but lots of Googling.
Any favorite Googling tips?
I love site : and then putting in the website. So I could do site : kitsmetrics.com, and then I can even type in different things like, let's say, cohort analysis, and you can find out everything we've written, everything we have on our site about cohort analysis. I think that's really cool. It's probably one of the key things. So you can just search a single site. Another one I really love, let's say I want to do research on Docker, right? I might type in like something like Docker container, maybe put it in quotes, and then do file type PDF. So I'm about to do that right now just to see what happens, because why not? And I get all the PDFs that mention Docker container. Oh, there's a Docker book. I didn't know that. The Linux Foundation talks about how they use enterprise Linux and Docker, or Docker in an enterprise Linux environment. It seems like, so you can learn a lot about something just by searching PDFs, basically, that Google has indexed, and they've indexed a shitload. Another thing is, many of you know of Forrester and Gartner and those reports. All you got to do is type in, like, if I type in right now Forrester marketing, and then file type PDF, I get all these PDFs of all their little wave analysis and all these reports on marketing. So it's like, oh, you want to do market research? No problem, right? Like, people spend a lot of money to take that time. But the thing is, Forrester partners with a lot of companies to give away PDFs as lead gen for everybody. And those companies actually pay for this privilege. And so a lot of these URLs are public. Like right now, the top result for Forrester marketing file type PDF is the Forrester Wave lead to revenue management vendors, platform vendors, and it's actually sitting on Eloqua's site, which is a marketing automation tool.
Yeah, it's probably an $800 report.
Yeah, you got it. So
awesome. That's a great. You just saved our audience $800.
Awesome.
What's next on your journey?
Yeah, I'm just going to do more of the same. I love SaaS. I love SaaS businesses, and I love helping other people, succeed as well. And so, luckily I can do that through my businesses, but I can also sort of do that by advising companies and occasionally investing in them. So that's kind of what's next, is just more of the same, growing my own businesses and trying to get better every day.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about you and your thinking, where do they find you?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is actually right down here at HN Shah, just like his is at Card Magic, and I have the SaaS newsletter at Heaton.com, Hiten.com, and I'm actually in the 30-day blogging challenge right now. I'm on day 10 today, so I'm a third of the way done. Wow! And I've been blogging every day, and I plan on doing it at least for the next 20 more days. And that's at Heatonism. So it's kind of like it's a play on hedonism, Hedonism. That's not the website. My website is Heatonism, Hitenism.com. And so I blog there, I tweet, and I have a newsletter. And I'm looking forward to helping people.
Perfect. Well, everybody should check those things out. I'll put the links in the show notes, and I really appreciate your time. It's been great talking to you.
Always great chatting. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Craftsman Founder podcast with Lucas Carlson. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, craftsmanfounder.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a Craftsman Founder production. Join us next time for another edition of the Craftsman Founder podcast.